and you saw it come into view, and everyone on the bus was like, "Oh look, fjellhissen! We're near Tromsø!" And like everyone got so excited. The kids were screaming, and that was just kind of, it was like, oh God, we're home. Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy to have you all here with me. Thank you for joining. My name is Samantha and I am the knitter and knitwear designer behind the Strikketjik. So you'll notice that we're in a bit of a weird filming location this time, and I will explain why. This past week, my lab sent me to London as part of a research conference. And unbeknownst to any of us, a SAS strike started right as I was about to leave. If you haven't heard about the strike, it's been going on for around 2 weeks now. And it's essentially a lot of pilots in Norway and Sweden are striking because SAS is violating labor laws and hiring cheaper pilots before they hire back the ones that they laid off during the pandemic. So the consequence of this is that a lot of flights in Norway, especially from places like Oslo to the north of Norway, are being cancelled. And people are being stranded in cities in the south with no real way to get home. And this has happened to me. So my solution is that I am going to be catching an emergency bus from Oslo to Tromsø tomorrow, and that is going to take 26 hours. So I figured if I'm going to be sitting on a bus for 26 hours, you guys, then I need to be knitting. So I am going to check out a couple of the yarn stores in Oslo while I'm here, because this is actually my second time in Oslo. I really haven't gotten around much, and maybe pick up enough yarn for a project and then do a fun little knitting challenge when I'm on the bus, and just take you all along with me. And kind of check in at, because the bus goes from Oslo to Tromsø, but there's a lot of different stops along the way. So I'll have a voiceover of that, and then I'll have a little map for you so you can kind of see the route that I'm going to be taking up, and hopefully it should be kind of pretty. It is along the west coast of Norway, which is where all the pretty mountains and fjords and things are. So I'm thinking that I can use each little stop along the way as like a little check-in point for you, and then kind of have video of my progress so far on what I'm doing, and also maybe a couple videos out the window. So basically what this is at the end of the day is just me trying to make the best out of a crappy situation, and take you all with me, because that's always fun to have company. So yeah, without further ado, let's get to it. Hello, I am back with another update for you. I went into the city center of Oslo, and I will put a couple pictures of that here. And I went to this really cute yarn store in the Oslo City Mall called Strikkedilla, and picked up some yarn to knit with on the bus tomorrow. So I'm gonna show you. Crinkle bag. So this is Sandnesgarn Peer Gynt, and I am so sorry, that glare is awful, but it is picking up the color quite well, which is, it is 100% Norwegian wool, and it is a fairly thick yarn that I've worked with before quite a bit. Well, not quite a bit, but a little bit. I've never designed with it before, but I have used it before. And I really like the way it holds up, so I'm thinking this is a very nice non-fussy yarn to knit with on the bus ride. And I'm going to be holding that with a strand of tin silk mohair from Sandnesgarn in this really pretty jelly bean green. I think it actually is called jelly bean green, which is such a cute name for a color of yarn. It's been a bit popular lately, so I really wanted to try and knit with this. So yeah, it's gonna be, oh no, it's gonna be this held together. Yeah, that works. And I'm gonna be knitting them on, and I hope this works because I didn't swatch or anything. I just kind of picked up yarn, but they're going to be on 5.5mm needles. So not super thick needles, so it shouldn't kind of work up super fast. It should be enough to keep me going for some time during the day. But hopefully it's kind of goes quick enough and my hands don't hurt, because my hands really do start to hurt after a lot of knitting on really small needles. And you don't want that during a 24-hour knitting challenge. So I'm going to do a bit of swatching before I get on the actual bus, and I will get back to you about how that looks. Hey guys, so I have a little bit of an outfit change into pajamas and a swatch to show you. So I was really into working on this 1x1-ish ribbing pattern with a bit of a twist. You can see it there. So there's just a bit of a yarn over between these two knits that creates a bit of a figure 8 pattern. And here I tried to close it up to see if I like that look more. And I actually think I like this kind of open stitch pattern better. So I think what I'm gonna do, because I actually, I have my measuring tape with me because I thought I had. So I measured the swatch, and it shouldn't grow much because when I worked with Peer Gynt before, it didn't grow at all. And that, honestly, that was the bane of my existence, because that project was way too small. And I was really hoping for some like good blooming wool, but that is not Peer Gynt. And that's actually kind of why I chose it for this project, because I can't block my swatch and see what it looks like. So I need to know that what I'm knitting is going to be what the final dimensions are going to be in the end. And holding it with a thread of thin silk mohair will help that as well, because it'll help the stitches kind of stay the tension that they are. They won't stretch out too much when I block. So I think what I'm going to do is go with this kind of stitch pattern. So this instead of this across, and that really doesn't change the gauge very much at all, but I like the way it looks. So I've calculated my cast on numbers. I don't have separate small needles for the ribbing, just because that would have been a lot of money. And a bit of a waste, because I have so many needles back home. I just needed something real quick for the road. So I'm just gonna do less stitches for the ribbing, and then increase and move on to the main body on the same size. And I think I'm gonna try to keep the construction as simple as possible, so it's gonna end up being a bit of a drop shoulder sweater, kind of the way I did Liscanor. If anyone has bought the pattern for that or has knit that in the past, then you know that it's a very, very beginner friendly construction that's very easy to put together if you're on the bus with not a lot of math, I think, is the big thing. I don't want to be doing bus math. So yeah, I think I might actually cheat a little bit, and I might do the cast on tonight, but I won't knit really until I'm on the bus tomorrow, just so it is actually a whole start to finish knitting adventure on the bus with you. But just as a sneak peek, this is what I'm going to be knitting. Wish me luck. So by the time I got onto the bus, actually at
I want to say 4 o'clock. We were a bit late starting out just because we were waiting for some stragglers, so it was more close to 4:15. So I tried to kind of time the 24-hour knitting challenge from 4:15 in the morning to, or 4:15 in the afternoon to 4:15 the next afternoon, which should have been like an hour before we arrived. But by the time we had gotten on to the bus, I had already done about 2 or 3 centimeters of the ribbing. So I know that I said, when I showed the swatch, I said that I was going to maybe cast on and then I would leave it after the cast on and kind of have a whole kind of organic growth of a project from start to wherever I ended up after 24 hours as my 24-hour challenge. But impatience got the better of me and I finished the second sleeve of the other project that I'd brought along. I couldn't work on that anymore, and so my hands were itching to do something, and I just started going with the ribbing. So I kind of cheated a bit, and the progress that you see at the end is not kind of from hour 0, it's more a little bit of extra work and then the next bit of stuff. So we left Oslo at about 4:15 in the afternoon. And honestly, it was quite a relief to just kind of pull out of that bus terminal and to know that was the last bit of the very eventful journey back home. And at that point, I'd already had 2 centimeters of ribbing finished. And I tried to document this actually with a couple pictures every single hour to just kind of see how much I was doing every single hour, just to kind of, I don't know, make it like a bit of a check-in for myself along the way. So as we left Oslo and we headed towards Trondheim, I was still working on the twisted ribbing of the sweater, which actually is the part that ended up flying by. I was done with the ribbing long before we reached Trondheim. In the first hour kind of being on the bus, I had finished the ribbing, and the ribbing is not, I mean, it's 7 centimeters long. So I had high hopes for my knitting productivity for the rest of the trip. So I thought that I was in for a really speedy knitting project because the ribbing had kind of flown by in so short of a time span. And then I got to the increase row. So as I talked about in the swatching video, because I didn't want to buy more needles than kind of necessary because they were quite expensive, I decided to do fewer stitches for the ribbing and then kind of increase proportionally for the main body pattern of the sweater. And for this pattern, it ended up being kind of a very convenient, you would make 5 stitches out of 4 existing stitches. And so I just kind of was doing that the whole way across, and I realized that as I came to the end of the increase row, I was off a couple stitches, and that's because of a mistake that I'd made all the way at the beginning, which kind of, I'm gonna blame it on bus knitting and kind of distracting stuff going on around me, people talking, exciting things to look at out the window, so on and so forth. But then I did end up having to unravel all the way back to the start of the row and then redo the increase row, and that whole process took me close to an hour. So that was a bit kind of, I had done 5 centimeters of knitting in an hour and then 1 row of knitting in an hour, which was kind of a fun contrast to see. And then I didn't we stopped for dinner between Oslo and Trondheim. And at that point, I, like a bit of a idiot, I left my knitting in the bus and then they locked the bus, so I didn't get very much done during that point of time. And surprisingly to me, I don't know why I found it so surprising, but in the south of Norway you have sunsets. Because in Tromsø, as I've mentioned before, we have midnight sun in the summer where the sun doesn't set, and it's actually quite beneficial to me as a knitter because I can just knit until all kinds of late hours and visibility is not a problem for me. But as we neared Trondheim, it was actually quite dark. And obviously the driver had turned the lights off in the bus because it was close to 11 p.m. at night and people were trying to get some sleep at that point. So it became a little bit harder to knit. And I know that I said 24-hour knitting challenge, but guys, I was exhausted. So I may or may not have caught some sleep in there too. So I have like a little kind of a photo to show you of the knitting in the dark in Trondheim, and then from there to my progress update in Mosjøen, there really isn't much that happens because we arrived at Mosjøen at like 6 in the morning and Trondheim at 11 the night before, and in that interval I either slept or I was just too sleepy to knit. But yeah, we kind of, so I learned fairly early on because I was talking about the yarn in the swatching video as well, where I was using Peer Gynt, which was my kind of unfussy base yarn, and then the Tin Silk Mohair. And I kind of had these on the seat next to me, just kind of pulling away at the balls of yarn. And there's a bit of a fun situation where the bus is moving, you're trying to like hold your knitting, you're trying to pull at the yarn, and the balls are kind of rolling around, and so that was always kind of a fun little like heart stopper, trying to catch the yarn before it went on the floor. So a little bit more difficult than I had initially anticipated that to be. A lot of the roads around the Norwegian west coast are not so well maintained. They're kind of a little bit potholy, and you have a lot of twists and turns because you are going through mountains, around mountains, under and over bodies of water, and so it's a little bit rough. I think if you are very prone to getting car sick, it's a bit rough to knit as you're on the bus, especially in Norway. And thankfully I am not prone to car sickness at all, so it really wasn't so much of a big deal for me. And then I kind of like, I have some videos of myself knitting on the bus, and you'll see me like looking out of the window every so often, and that's kind of to like help myself stay a bit kind of orienting myself with the motion of the bus. As far as what we saw on the way, because I was quite interested actually, just to see, because I really haven't done very much traveling in Norway outside of Tromsø. And I was kind of interested in knowing what the geography was like in different parts of Norway. And you could see very clearly, I mean, as we're driving through Oslo, it was very kind of rolling hills and a lot of green, and you had like cute little farmhouses, and it all looked very kind of, it almost reminded me a bit of Sweden. It had that kind of landscape to it. And then you'll notice as we get from Trondheim and above, kind of where we pass into, I want to say Narvik? No, not Narvik, the stop before that, Fauske, which was like right above Mosjøen. That's when you get into the Arctic Circle, and that's when you start seeing the mountains that still have some snow on them. So you go from having this very rolling, hilly, green, kind of very, farmland, idyllic type landscape, to having the like majestic stone mountains and the fjords and that kind of, and that's so cool that you get all of that along the coast in the same country. And I tried to make lemonade out of lemons and kind of enjoy the scenery as we drove along and pass the time and not think about the fact that this is a 26-hour bus ride.
Right.
The weather was actually pretty crap the whole way, which was, I guess, pretty good staying inside the bus weather, because if it had been really hot and sunny outside, maybe it would get a little bit too warm for comfort inside the bus. But it was around 9 or 10 degrees Celsius, and it was quite foggy or rainy depending on kind of which town we were passing through. So very nice knitting weather as well. That was not so great for getting the views outside, unfortunately. I'm sure everything looks a lot more pretty in the blue skies and sunlight, but I was very happy knitting. And I realized though, because I knit my ribbing up so fast, and then I was like, oh, the body is just a modification of 1x1 rib. It'll fly by just as quickly as the ribbing. And I could not have been more wrong. I don't know what it was about, for some reason, because the pattern that I'm using, it has twisted knits, purls, regular knit stitches, and then you have the yarn overs to create kind of an eyelet effect. Let me try to show you. Yeah, these little yarn overs that create a little eyelet effect. So the pattern does kind of change every single row, and I don't know if it was because of that or because I was trying to focus on kind of keeping my yarn on my lap or whatever else, but it just it took so long to knit kind of every repeat of 5. So it almost took, I want to say, a little bit more than an hour to knit a 5-row repeat. And ordinarily I don't think it would take me that long. But yeah, I think I had got my hopes up quite a bit, you guys, because I was thinking I'll definitely have a body finished by the time we get off the bus, and I have, I think, 21 centimeters done, which is kind of close. It's a good chunk of progress for just a bus ride, but I was hoping for more. I was hoping for something I could have even maybe worn and shown you. But I guess I'm gonna chalk it up to the fact that I was tired, and maybe my expectations were very high because the sweater that I was knitting before was in stockinette, and that just flies right by. So I don't know. But I still, I mean, the whole point kind of my whole little knitting challenge ordeal was to find a way to occupy myself and not be so miserable. And I think that succeeded, and I'm actually quite happy with the end result that came out of it, because I thought I was just creating a pattern out of necessity, but I'm actually quite pleased with what it looks like, with the texture and the color, which is just, I think it's gorgeous. I mean, it's very kind of on trend at the moment, and I try not to go for kind of things that are just very hot at the moment, but then no one will be wearing it in a year, but I really like this. So I think, independent of the fact that other people like it, I think it's quite nice. So the design actually is from, I don't remember what stitch dictionary it was online. I was kind of just looking into cool variations on rib, just because I was like, oh crap, I don't have any design ideas for this sweater that I'm gonna start knitting on a bus. And so I was looking at potential stitch patterns, and I found this kind of easy knit stitch collection, which was good because I didn't want to do any complicated lace knitting. I didn't want to do any cable knitting because I mean, a cable needle on a bus, if you lose that, you're done. But I found this kind of a very pretty, like, little 1x1 rib modification that I really hadn't seen in a lot of knit designs. So it looked like something really cute and unique, and kind of a little bit lace knitting-y without being too kind of holy and exposed. So kind of a nice little option for fall. So the problem with this pattern though was that it's a 5-row repeat. And the problem with odd numbered row repeats is that you don't have a specified right side and wrong side, because it's an odd number of rows. So then you'll change that up kind of, right? On every repeat, you'll end on an odd numbered row. If you started on an odd numbered row, and then row 1 now becomes an even numbered row. And for this pattern especially, where you're like passing stitches over each other, and if you do that on the wrong side and the right side, and you change that up, it starts to look different. And you really, I mean, I tried swatching, because I did knit back and forth for my swatch, and I saw what that looked like when you crisscross. And I didn't really like it so much, because I was like, if you knit in the round for the whole body and then you start crisscrossing, it's going to be a very clear difference. And I know I was initially saying that I wanted kind of a fit like Liscanor, where you do knit in the round up the body and then you split for the front and back, where you are knitting back and forth. And I decided to go with something else. At the end of the day, I think eventually what this is going to be is it's going to be a bottom-up raglan sweater, just because then you can kind of keep everything on the right side. And I also think that raglan decreases would look quite pretty with a pattern like this, just because it is bulkier, just because it is rib. So if you tried to make it like a square, you would have this very oversized fit that I don't think quite suits ribbed sweaters. It's more something that, like, Liscanor looks great in it because it's strukturstrik. It's kind of like, it's meant to be a bit boxy, but this would look really nice with like a more fitted feminine type of construct. So maybe it's a good thing I didn't get too far with the body, because I definitely would have pressed on and tried to kind of do the back and forth. But now it is definitely going to be raglan, for sure. So from Falsk onwards, we headed to Narvik, which was supposed to be our last stop before Tromsø, but we ended up having some little tiny stops here and there, kind of in the north of Norway, before finally reaching Tromsø. And kind of the fun part about the ride, so when we got, I think it was like 30 minutes out of Foska, we had to take a ferry to get to Narvik. And that was quite cool because you kind of, they have these huge ferries to get you across the kind of larger fjords in Norway. So the bus drove right onto the ferry, and then we all got off, and there was like a cafeteria and a restroom upstairs. And then there was also kind of like several viewing decks where you could see the mountains kind of come into view from the other side of the island. And that was super cool because you start getting up into real northern Norway, right? And it kind of, I don't know why it reminded me so much of like Jumanji or King Kong or like some kind of undiscovered landscape. Maybe it was the fog, maybe it was like the fog and the mountains and the ferry, and I don't know, but it looked really cool. So I was like, yes, I am an explorer. I delve into uncharted lands, not even kind of on a tour bus charter thing, but it felt like it. But it was really, really nice to kind of, other people were staying in the cabin inside because it was a bit drizzly and it was kind of like, it was cold. And I was just like, oh God, fresh air, give me that fresh air. And I have never felt more Norwegian in my life, you guys. I would have been in that cabin in the States, but I was like, oh man, like I love this cold, fresh Arctic goodness. So yeah, it was sad to get on the bus again, honestly. But I really enjoyed that. And then as we went onwards to Narvik, that was I knew that there were 3 hours between Narvik and Tromsø, so it was like, okay, final stretch, we can do this. And I think knitting-wise, it's kind of like as you get to the end of the skein, if you've ever experienced, if you start to reach the end of your skein, you knit faster for some reason. And for me, it was like as we got closer to Tromsø, I started to knit faster. And maybe it was like excitement, and then you start knitting faster as you're excited, I don't know. But I did go from doing 1 5-row repeat every hour and a half-ish to doing like a 5-row repeat in 30 minutes. And I was like, oh, where did that come from? But yeah, I kind of definitely sped up a bit. And there wasn't, I think it might have also been, there's not much variation in the pattern. It's the same 5 rows that you go through again and again and again and again, and there's no shaping, there's nothing really, because I didn't want a complicated project. And as I started to kind of get into the groove, maybe that helped a bit, and I was more awake, I'd had a coffee, love coffee, because at that point I knew I'm not going back to sleep, so. At this point I realized it was maybe time to get more B-roll footage of the mountains and such outside the window. Because it was a bit of a struggle, right? Because you're trying to get kind of footage, pictures and video of your knitting in the bus. And honestly, I think people in that bus thought I was some kind of weird, wacky tourist because I just kept taking videos and photos out of the window and of my knitting and of myself. And I don't know. I don't think anyone really, I don't care what they thought, but it was a bit of a struggle to remember to every so often as you're taking video of yourself knitting to also take video outside the window and to kind of balance knitting, recording the scenery. Yeah, so I think the moment that I kind of got really excited about being back to Tromsø, we have this kind of, we call it fjellhissen. It's like the mountain elevator, essentially. And what it is it's kind of this cable car up this mountain called Fløya that's actually, you can see it from our house. It's just, it's a very kind of quintessentially Tromsø mountain. Everyone in Tromsø has climbed it. It's got a little cafe at the top. It's very cute. And you saw it come into view and everyone on the bus was like, oh look, fjellhissen! We're near Tromsø! And everyone got so excited. The kids were screaming and that was just kind of, it was like, oh God, we're home. Finally, I didn't know if it would happen, but here we are. It's like equal parts just relieved to be home and then quite mad that I'd have to be in that ordeal in the first place. And that was the time I started measuring my knitting and starting to pack things up and take some final videos and photos and, kind of make sure, because I had one of the seats near the door. And I was getting myself prepared to just grab everything and run off the bus. But yeah, I think I will be very, very happy if I never see another charter bus again. But bus knitting, I mean, I actually, oh, this sweater now has such a fun little story to it. So when I'm kind of finishing up the design and naming it and such, I definitely want to incorporate some aspect of this whole kind of monumentous bus trip into the pattern name. So we'll see what that becomes. And I'm very excited to keep working on this after I finished up some projects that I had kind of put on hiatus as I was traveling. But yeah, very happy to be home finally at the end of the day. And I don't know, I'm not actually sick of knitting after doing it for 26 hours straight. You would think that I would be like, oh gosh, I just want to do something else for a bit, but no, I've just been knitting on the couch all day. So, I mean, hey, you love what you love. So I really hope that you liked this vlog and enjoyed seeing some footage of my 26-hour bus trip through Norway. Definitely an experience, but I'm very happy I'm home, and I'm very, very happy that I had my knitting to keep me company along the way. And I will definitely be featuring, if you like this sweater, I will be talking about it on Works in Progress as it knits up on my future vlogs. And there will be a testing call, hopefully, in the coming months, so stay tuned for that. And if you want to say hi, you can find me over on Instagram, Ravelry, and TikTok as The Strickachick, and also on my own website, thestrickachick.com. Until next time, happy knitting! Bye!